Ainge was quoted yesterday as saying that he didn't think there was anyone who could come in and change the face of the franchise, and Boston's picking a spot ahead of you. Do you feel the same way with the 7th pick?
Well, Mike, I wouldn't say it was bad luck. We were hoping to get lucky, but as you know, we could have dropped down to number 9 too. So, we were hoping to get lucky, or at worst case, stay where we were. But it could have been worse. As far as what Danny said, that's up to him. We think drafting at number 7, there's going to be a good player available there. Maybe Danny's talking more about a guy that changes the face of an organization from the get-go. But, you really can't evaluate these things until years later when you look back on it. Damian Lillard's a great example. I don't think anybody thought, walking through the draft, that he would turn into the player as quickly as he did. But looking back on it, it's a heck of a selection. So we'll be able to get a good player, and we're hoping that 3 or 4 years from now we can look back on it and he's even a better player than we thought.
Hi, Mitch. Mark Medina with the LA Daily News. How are you doing?
Good. Morning.
Just to kind of piggyback off what Mike was asking, when you look at that field, what sort of impact do you think a player selected at 7th could make for you guys?
Well, it depends. Most of the players in the draft, for the last 15 to 18 years have been young developing players, and some of them make a contribution quicker than others. There's certainly a couple guys that played more than 2 years. There's a kid that played 4 years that might make a contribution quicker. I'm not saying he would be somebody we would consider or not consider at 7. My point is, typically, and we've kind of gotten used to it over the years, is that you do have to work with the younger player, and those are the guys that get drafted the highest. Whether they're freshman or sophomore, it may take a year or two.
How did the lottery kind of happening? How does that affect the rest of your off season? You kind of indicated that would kind of be the starting point for everything else as you evaluate maybe a coach and the direction you might want to go in free agency.
Yeah, it's another piece of information. It doesn't really get us any further along in hiring a coach, but it is another piece of information. Right now, the day after the lottery, it doesn't really affect our approach to the off season beginning July 1st.
When do you see yourself becoming more immersed in the coaching search? Next week, maybe early June? Or do you feel like the wheels have already started turning pretty substantially?
I would say we actually, and I'm sure names will come out, on within the next couple of days. But we've started our process, and we intend to continue the process in terms of talking to potential coaches, whether they're informal or formal interviews. We'll do both. And I would not anticipate hiring a coach in the next 2 or 3 weeks, but we'll interview several, more than 3 or 4 probably.
Mitch, could you by any chance characterize where you are in the process? Have you begun interviewing coaches or potential candidates, or are you still in the information gathering stage?
Yes, we have begun.
Mitch, in regards to the coaching search, when you're looking at the candidates, what variables are you measuring to determine whether you want to pursue a veteran coach or a young coach?
Well, I think right now our interviews will, they'll be formal in terms of, sitting down and talking for a couple of hours, but, at some point we'll probably have to sit down a second time, and I think that's where we are right now, the beginning of the process, whether it's a veteran coach or I think, a rookie coach. That's not something that we're prepared to comment on right now.
Just getting back to the draft, was there anything that you were able to zero in on at the combine for guys that are likely going to be in this range, and when do you start having players come in, and what kind of impact do you think that can make for workouts?
The combine has really evolved over the years, and the most useful information out of the combine is really the interview process and the testing and the medical, physical process. Very limited basketball activity, and the guys that did work out, really none of them were lottery players, at least last week. Based on workouts going forward, maybe somebody can jump in there. But right now, they were just, that quality of player. And that's not to say the other guys at the Combine that did work out won't be in the NBA and won't be drafted perhaps in the first round. But as you know, most of the lottery guys, quote unquote, did not play.
And then just with the guys now, do you plan on zeroing in around this pick, or do you still continue to look at the rest of the draft, depending on if you make a trade or something?
We started last night calling and trying to set up workouts with probably everybody in the top, in our board anyway, top 15 to 20. Some of those guys, don't think they're going to be there at 7, so they won't come in. Nothing we can do about that. But some guys, that are drafted, later, and you may say, well, why bring in a guy that might go 20? Well, you never know, number one. And number two, you have the opportunity to develop a relationship with a player. Why not do it? So that started last night.
On the coaching front, I'm sure you don't want to talk specific names, but in terms of timing, could your situation be impacted, whether it's a Derek Fisher type or somebody who's still in the playoffs, maybe an assistant coach that you have interest in? Are the playoffs going to come into play here timing-wise?
Right now it's not a factor, but like I said, I don't see the process ending in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And it depends how the process goes. We may want to open it up and consider other people. But right now, that's the only way I can answer it.
Mitch, Bill Orem again. Similarly, do other teams' openings and hires impact, so far, have they impacted your search?
No.
How does knowing now that you have the number 7 pick versus, say, a top 3 pick influence the likelihood of whether or not you think you'll be trading the pick?
Well, it stands to reason that the higher the pick, the more value it has. A 6 pick or a 7 pick, which is where we ended up, certainly has value. We'll evaluate that, between now and the draft on July 1st.
Is there extra value in getting young talent that you can control on rookie contracts? You really don't have that right now.
Well, that's one of the benefits of, having draft picks, that there's a salary scale going forward. If it's a first-round pick, you could basically pencil in 4 years of salary. And then the 5th year, if he signs a 1-year deal, you pretty much know that number too. So really you have salary certainty for 5 years on a first-round pick. Second round is a little bit different. So yeah, it's a factor, but it's not really, that much of a factor with us because we've only got 1 pick this year. Yeah, we know what that pick's going to make, but we still have to field a roster, of 7 to 8 more players.
Having gone through this coaching search, a couple times here recently, are there some things you guys will do differently this time around after those?
Well, I think clearly it will it'll be a longer process, for obvious reasons. And I assume, you're alluding to our last hire, which really took less than a week, Mike D'Antoni. This process will be considerably longer. We don't, for a bunch of different reasons. Number one, we have a lot more time. Number two, we don't really know what our team looks like, and there is no urgency right now, so it'll be a more deliberate process.
With the coaching search, are there any particular offensive and defensive philosophies that you're looking for in a candidate?
I wouldn't use the word philosophy, but we have a player on our team right now who's proven in this league. Offensively, he can score. That certainly is a consideration. And obviously, I'm talking about Kobe. He's under contract for 2 more years, and we think he's a very integral part of this team. So we have to make sure that whoever we hire as a coach can really get the most productivity out of him, whether it's scoring the ball or playmaking or the threat that he may score. That's probably of primary importance right now. In the last year, he's been over here working out, and he looks good. Over the years, his game has changed from, really a game where he's pretty wild and athletic and at times out of control. This is in the early part of his career. And I would say for the last 7 or 8 years, he's become more deliberate and of course he's gotten a little bit older, I think he's become most effective. I think you'll see a lot of him posting up. I think you'll see with the ball in his hands making plays. End of games, he's going to have the ball in his hands. He's going to get a call. He's going to make free throws. So, the Kobe today is different than the Kobe 15 years ago. And I don't think that's a secret. And I think Kobe knows where on the court he'll be most effective, whether it's playmaking, being a decoy, or scoring the ball. And I think we know where those places are.
On the coaching front, just trying to get a sense of how wide of a net you might be casting here. Any chance that another team's head coach could come into play? And I ask that in light of the fact that, Dave Yeager of the Grizzlies is going to interview with Minnesota. And you see stuff like with Doc Rivers last year where one team has interest in another team's coach and something can get worked out. Is that a possibility for you guys at all?
Yeah. Oh, well, why wouldn't it be a possibility? We don't have a timeline. And if we had a timeline for tomorrow or Friday or the weekend, then I would say that's remote. But I mentioned earlier, this is going to go on at least 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm not anticipating, what you just mentioned being a part of the process. But we'll just monitor how it plays out with the teams that are out there and, see what the playing field provides and make decisions accordingly.